So I've been pretty ignorant when it comes to robots in science fiction, and I'm pleased to say that after reading this book this week, I now have a better idea of what it's all about. What's up guys, welcome back to Unlimited Reads. My name is Chris and today I'll be officially wrapping up my week 4 of New World November, the fantastic reading project created by the Bookish Bryants, where a group of co-hosts come together and read nothing but science fiction for the month of November. Now just to recap, there were 4 separate categories for each of the weeks of November. The first category in week 1 was terrestrial, any work of science fiction that takes place on planet Earth. Week 2 was the theme of extraterrestrial, which is a work of science fiction that takes place on another planet besides Earth. Week 3 was any work of science fiction predating 1965, and week 4 was robots and AI. Now for this week I chose the very famous I, Robot by Isaac Asimov, which is about 9 or 10 short stories that are all linked together by a common narrative. Now the whole book is linked by a few characters. The first character is Dr. Susan Calvin. She is a robo-psychologist and she's being interviewed in between the stories by a journalist, so she's in fact imparting her tale to this reporter about her experiences with a variety of different robots and technology spanning quite a few years. I believe when she's being interviewed she's a very old woman, and the stories go back through her career on how she interacts with different types of robots. We also have 2 more recurring characters, 2 robot engineers called Donovan and Powell, who feature in a few of these stories, and they also have experiences and altercations with various robots. Now the book explores the 3 main laws of robotics, and the first law is a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. The second law is a robot must obey the orders it's given by humans except where such orders could conflict with the first law. And a robot, law number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. So throughout some of the stories I found the 3 laws, especially when they're conflicted, to be a little bit confusing, but I did like a few of these stories and I wanted to point them out in particular. So the first story that I enjoyed was Robbie, which is the first story in the book. Now the opening sequence gets your attention straight away because you have Gloria, who's a little girl who becomes dependent on Robbie the Robot, so much so that she will not interact with children her own age. She is withdrawn. She sees Robbie as a real person, and yeah, it's not what I call a healthy relationship. So then Robbie disappears and Mrs. Weston, the mother, buys a dog to try and take her mind off Robbie, but Gloria is obsessed. They bribe her with a trip to New York to tour museums and factories and things like that, and it's Mr. Weston, who believes Robbie should have stayed. He hatches a very, very sneaky plan for Gloria and Robbie to be seemingly reunited by pure coincidence, but it turns out that Mr. Weston is pulling the strings the whole time, and eventually we see Robbie save Gloria's life, and Mrs. Weston, who was always against Robbie and didn't think it was healthy having him in the house, eventually gives in. So we get our first introduction with Robbie there, and I just found it really, really interesting, and how you can become a slave to technology as well and just depend upon this technology. It was a pretty well written story. The whole lot of stories are very well written, but I feel Isaac Asimov, his characterization isn't his strong suit. The next story I want to talk about was another standout called Run Around. Now in this one there's a robot called Speedy who finds it impossible to obey both the second and third law at the same time, and this freezes it in a loop of repetitive behaviour. Now Powell and Donovan are on Mercury, where Speedy is a mining robot, and it fails to complete its mission of retrieving selenium from a pool. The conflicting laws of robotics cause a feedback loop of repetitive behaviour, so it can't retrieve the selenium. But eventually Pal and Donovan get the robot back and repair the photo cell banks. And yeah, it was an interesting one, although the conflicting laws in this one were pretty confusing, but it gave me a fair bit of insight into how robots can succumb to different situations and how they're not perfect, and how they can be corrupted, essentially. So the next story, which was my favourite of the collection, is Reason. Now this was where Pal and Donovan really started to grow on me, so it does take a bit of time for the characters to really grow on you, and I felt you know, I appreciated them a little bit more and began to understand how they work. So we see them at a space station that emits microwave particles to planets, and there are a crew of robots there commanded by QT1, or dubbed Cutie, and he's highly programmed with deductive reasoning, and Cutie thinks that the men are superior, and doesn't believe that humans built robots. He believes, or Cutie believes, that the master, being the brain center of the facility, is the master, and that's what created it. But they try and prove to Cutie that in fact humans did build him, and they give a demonstration of building a robot from scratch. They do have to assemble the parts, and Cutie looks on and still doesn't believe them, because he says, that's fine, you've built it from assembled parts, so you haven't really created a robot from scratch. And eventually we find that QT makes the lesser robots disciples of this new religion of worshipping this so-called master of the facility. And it's not until Pal and Donovan witness Cutie's actions in keeping the particle beam steady, which is a very, very crucial function of the facility, that they sort of stand corrected, and they leave the station thinking, oh well, Cutie is a good robot after all, despite his derogatory faults towards humans. But I found the premise of a reasoning robot very, very interesting, and it was certainly my favourite of the lot, because I did find myself beginning to like Donovan and Pal a lot more. Now the next story I wanted to touch upon was Liar. This one was really fascinating. This involved a mind-reading robot that is known as Herbie, RB34, and it possesses telepathic abilities. So while the technicians investigate how this occurred, the robot tells them what other people are thinking. Now this is very, very dangerous, because the first law still applies to this robot, but it deliberately lies so it doesn't hurt humans' feelings. And yeah, especially in matters of the heart, in terms of romance and that sort of thing. However, by lying, it's hurting humans anyway. So when Susan Calvin confronts it after learning the falsehood regarding the feelings of a co-worker towards her, she believes that one of her co-workers loves her, but it's not the case. The robot just told her what she wanted to hear, and she confronts it, and she causes it to have a massive logical conflict within itself, where it can't process the information. And if you get a picture in your head of a robot having a nervous breakdown, and it just crumples to the ground and doesn't move, it's like it's catatonic, because it couldn't cope with that stimuli. And as I said, the idea of a mind-reading robot was very, very fascinating. So some of the other stories were a little bit confusing. The characterization wasn't Asimov's strong suit, as I mentioned before, although the stories were quite well written, and the book, you can see why it's an absolute classic amongst science fiction fandom. And I really enjoyed experiencing the different types of robots and how they worked. And now that I've read this book, I'll probably go and watch the movie to see how it compares. And yeah, it should be good. But before I wrap things up, I'll go through what I checked off in the subcategories as well for a bit of fun. The subcategories that were included here included alien technology, alien romance, translated work, alternate world dimensions, far future, war, military, genre crossing, first contact, time travel, invasion, humorous, political, and libraries. Now I crossed off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the list. So alien archaeology obviously was from Across a Billion Years. Alternate worlds or dimensions were from The Veldt. from the Illustrated Man. The Far Future was The Other Foot, also from the Illustrated Man. Time Travel was Fox in the Forest, again from the Illustrated Man, and humorous was Slaughterhouse-Five. I found that to be humorous at times, so I think it certainly fit that category. So there you go, guys, that is it for my week 4 New World's November wrap-up. I had a blast with this project. I must thank the Bookish Bryants for creating the project and letting me participate. It has been great, and I really look forward to doing more projects with them in the future. So yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please offer up any comments below. Have you read iRobot? Let me know what you think. As always, I'm always up for a chat. And until next time, guys, I'll see you later.